Hi, I'm Gregg with the Rhode Island Natural History Survey. On November 1st, we held our annual awards event at the Barrington Public Library. The video you're about to watch is the presentation of the Distinguished Naturalist Award to Charlie Brown, and also the Distinguished Naturalist Award to Virginia Brown. We made another video with the presentation of the Founders Award for Exceptional Service to Helen Lucy. The Rhode Island Natural History Survey presents videos to showcase the animals, plants, geology, and natural systems that surround us, and the people and organizations working to understand and conserve them. Hello, everybody. Good evening. I'm Gregg. I'm the director of the Rhode Island Natural History Survey, and you'll hear more from me as the evening goes on. But first, I wanted to introduce Cindy Elder, who is the executive director of the Barrington Conservation Land Trust, a co-sponsor of this evening's event. Cindy.
I am so pleased that you are all here. My name is Cindy Elder. I am the new first only ever executive director of the Barrington Land Conservation Trust, because they took a leap and decided they were going to move beyond being an all volunteer organization, and they were going to hire me. So good luck to them, right? This is super fun for me because I feel like I know lots of you, my former colleagues at the DEM. Gregg's a longtime friend, just lots of folks here who I have had a chance to work with in the past. But, you know, I'm especially honored to be here with Helen Lucy and with Ginger and Charlie Brown, who have such generosity of spirit and have influenced so many people. And I know here at the Barrington Land Conservation Trust that everyone tells me that they spent many, many hours teaching us about the natural world, from dragonflies to grasses to fish to trees and turtles and more. And so thank you. So I will hand it over to everyone else in the program, but we're delighted you've come to our beautiful library and to our town, and we welcome you to walk our trails. And if you are ever interested in seeing some of our properties, which are more sensitive and therefore closed to the public except for guided tours, just give me a shout and I'll be happy to take you for a walk. Okay? Thanks, everybody.
First, I want to thank Cindy and the Barrington Land Trust for hosting our event tonight. My name is Peter August. I'm a board member for the Rhode Island Natural History Survey. And on behalf of the board, I want to officially give you a warm Natural History Survey welcome to the event tonight. The awards are a board activity. The board comes up with the nominations, they review the nominations, and they make the decision who gets the award. And it's one of the most gratifying activities that the board does. And tonight is definitely one of the most fun, interesting, and special evening events of the year. So we're really, really happy to be part of this process. Keith Killingbeck, Dr. Keith Killingbeck, chairs the awards committee. He is brokenhearted that he can't be here. He had a knee replaced a couple of days ago, and so he's still hobbling around with a bunch of stitches going down his leg, but wanted me to extend his warm welcome, his thanks to our incredible recipients tonight, who you're going to learn a lot about. And I want to acknowledge Keith and the awards committee for all the work that they do to bring great people to the forefront like what we're going to hear tonight. So with that, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the event, and thank you for having us.
I started, you're supposed to start a talk with a joke, and so I Googled natural history jokes, and they were all about dinosaurs, so I just gave up. I'm not going to tell you a riddle about dinosaurs. So, there was one about what kind of socks do bears wear? None. They have bare feet. Okay, so. So now we're going to do the Distinguished Naturalist Awards. And This was an award that was created at the survey's founding 28 years ago, and it is therefore our oldest award. It is presented annually to an individual who has excelled in one or more of the following areas. It has made a significant contribution to the advancement of scientific knowledge of Rhode Island's organisms, geology, and ecosystems, as evidenced by published books, scientific papers, and monographs, or is recognized as an outstanding teacher and educator to students and the public on the form, functions, and ecological significance of Rhode Island's biota and natural systems, or made significant contributions in enhancing public awareness of the importance of understanding the natural history of Rhode Island's ecosystems. Worthy naturalists are nominated by the public, and the award is made by the board of directors. We have had we have made 26 awards to living naturalists before tonight, as well as 19 posthumous awards. Recipients include fabulously well-studied scholars, such as Douglas Morse or Candace Oviatt, inspiring teachers such as Frank Gillette or Hugh Willoughby, articulate communicators like Peter Lord and Ken Weber, tireless builders of institutions like Lisa Gould or Linda Green, visionary leaders such as Al Hawks, and enthusiasts with focus and energy to carry forward all those around them, such as Steve Reinert and this person with a turtle, Charlotte Zornborger. The goals of the award are several. First and foremost, to recognize and thank those who labor in a field that can be difficult or obscure, isolating and lacking in public appreciation. To raise up people who have made important contributions, but who could easily be lost to history if we didn't put down this marker. To provide role models for future generations of naturalists. Through the nomination and award process, including tonight's gathering, to foster a community among people who believe in the importance of the natural world, the importance of a natural historical perspective for understanding it, and the value of any energetic, curious, thoughtful person's work to a collective understanding of our environment. The board has received many, many nominations over the years. To be named a distinguished naturalist is to be singled out from an already accomplished company. The board's annual awards discussions make clear that the vision of the awards includes not just traditional academic style scholarship, not just great organizational development, not just clever environmental ed, not just eerily accomplished amateurs. If your job is in a natural historical field, such as professor or resource manager, you don't win an award just for doing your job. If you're an amateur naturalist, you don't win this award just for doing a mass of work. You have to have an impact on Rhode Island and our understanding of the world around us that is expansive. When the board was discussing the nomination of Charlie Brown and Ginger Brown for the awards they are receiving tonight, there was little doubt that either would make a worthy recipient. One problem was, given that, which would you give this year and which next year? Wouldn't giving one first subtly devalue whoever was the second? Another problem was that, speaking of Charlie's accomplishments, the discussion only got so far before Ginger's name came up, and vice versa. And yet each of them made distinguished contributions of their own that should be recognized without reference to the other. What to do? The idea came up to award both in one year, and that suggestion was almost struck down because a joint award also could be perceived as showing less esteem for either individual. The conclusion was to award two completely separate awards for contributions that sometimes, but not always, included work of the other. This was to be very clear. This is the award of the Distinguished Naturalist to Charlie Brown, and also the award of the Distinguished Naturalist to Ginger Brown. And so I and the board know about the work of Charlie and Ginger that merit this award, but to give you some idea, we asked some people who have worked on projects with both of them to say a few words about what it is like to work with Ginger and Charlie. First, I wanted to read an email from somebody with a turtle, Charlotte Sornborger, who is well qualified to recognize a hero of conservation when she sees one. She writes, I am delighted to hear that Ginger and Charlie are each receiving a Distinguished Naturalist Award. I had the pleasure of working with both of them in one way or another over the years, about terrapins, wildflowers, land preservation. Their broad knowledge of our natural environment that they put to use with such perseverance and determination puts them solidly in the lead as 2022 recipients of the award. Second, I want to present to the two of you this book. So it's a story behind this. This is Wilding, Returning Nature to Our Farm by Isabella Tree. If you've been to Ginger and Charlie's house, you know that their garden is an extraordinary demonstration of what can be done, even in small spaces, to both produce food and foster nature. So this book is appropriate in that way. However, it is also a gesture from the 2003 Distinguished Naturalist, Hugh Willoughby. Hugh sent us a box of these. It basically just arrived at the office one day. And he told us that this made an extremely important point, and it inspired him, and he wanted us to give them away to people we thought would appreciate them. If you've ever met Hugh Willoughby, you know how thoughtful he is, and so I take this very seriously, and I present this book to Ginger and Charlie in that spirit on the occasion of their receiving the Distinguished Naturalist Award. Next is Mike Thomas, retired Connecticut state biologist. Mike said he's sorry he couldn't be here with us tonight, and he sent a letter for us to read. To read it, we will have Don DeHayes. Don is Provost Emeritus of the University of Rhode Island, a scholar who studies forest ecosystem health, and a member of the survey's board of directors. Don.
Thank you, David. Good evening, everyone. How are you all doing? Before I jump into this letter, let me just take a moment to join Kyra and David in congratulating and thanking Helen for her amazing service to the natural world and to the survey. And of course, for Charlie and Ginger, to congratulate you, to thank you for your enormous contributions. In reading this letter from Mike Thomas, who I assume you know well, it really struck me that he really captured the passion, the expertise that the two of you bring to your work, and the amazing contributions that you've made in this letter. So everyone indulge me for just a few minutes and bear with me as I read through this. I think it's really a special tribute to the work of Ginger and Charlie, the work you've done independently and together. This was a letter of support for the nomination written to David. Thank you for the opportunity to share some of the natural history experiences I've had with Ginger and Charlie Brown. I've known both of them for many years and could relate numerous stories after spending considerable time with them in the field. They are two of the best naturalists I know and terrific field companions. Charlie's expertise as a mammologist and Ginger's contributions to the study of damselflies and dragonflies of Rhode Island are well known. However, not everyone may be aware that they have made significant contributions to our knowledge of Rhode Island's robber fly fauna. Little is known about the biology and ecology of these predatory flies. For the past 20 years, Charlie and Ginger have been collaborating on a project to document the diversity, distribution, and seasonal abundance of robber flies occurring in southern New England. Tackling an entirely new taxon is no easy task, especially when it comes to learning fly morphology and nomenclature. Without any field guides or at a time any images were available on the internet, the only available resources were dichotomous keys in the literature. It wasn't long before Charlie and Ginger became proficient at recognizing the different subfamilies, genera, and species. Of the approximately 2,000 voucher specimens collected in Rhode Island, they have documented 63 species comprising 8 subfamilies and 27 genera. The only previous regional study of robber flies was in 1946 in Connecticut, which documented just 61 species. With baseline data lacking for Rhode Island, many of the species collected by Charlie and Ginger represent new regional, state, and county records. With their assistance, a synoptic collection is housed at the Rhode Island Natural History Survey. Some of their most significant discoveries in Rhode Island include the bee mimic robber fly, Lafria champlainii, a scrub oak specialist previously thought to be extirpated from New England, and I may not pronounce this correctly, so bear with me, the Panogasoma dorsatum, a regionally rare robber fly associated with pitch pine barrens. In the summer of '06, Ginger was the lead investigator studying the behavior and ecology of Panogasoma dorsatum at the Francis Carter Preserve. This is the only population known in Rhode Island and one of only 2 extant in New England. The project, funded by the Nature Conservancy and the Rhode Island Natural History Survey through a John Wald Science Grant, culminated in a manuscript with recommendations for a management plan and listing as a species of greatest conservation need. As for Charlie, he's an amazing field biologist. His desire and pursuit for new records is unrelenting, and rarely does an obstacle like an unnavigable road impede his way. He has the uncanny ability to spot some of the smallest species of robber flies weaving their way through the vegetation or perching camouflaged on the ground. For anyone who has spent time in the field with Charlie, you quickly learn to keep your distance when he's swinging an insect net. The speed is lightning quick, powerful, and deadly accurate. Rarely does he miss his target. And if he does, it will be one of the rare instances when you might hear Charlie uttering a few words not found in the dictionary. I've had the pleasure of traveling with Ginger and Charlie to several states in the West and the Southeast. Often these trips have been to National Dragonfly Society of America meetings, with the focus on finding species not found in the Northeast. These trips also provide the opportunity to observe many other species of flora and fauna, including rarely encountered mammals, birds, reptiles, tiger beetles, and of course, robber flies. Their passion and persistence in tracking down a species are unmatched. Other naturalists often lament when Charlie and Ginger find a species that has gone undetected for years right in their own backyards. I have lost track of the number of new state and county records they are credited with over the years. With their combined set of diverse field skills, Ginger and Charlie are a highly effective team. Their contributions have significantly advanced our knowledge of Rhode Island's mammal and invertebrate fauna. You could not have selected 2 more deserving people to be honored with this distinguished naturalist award. This is exactly the way the board felt. With much respect and admiration for 2 great friends, naturalists, and field companions, Mike Thomas. Congratulations to Charlie and Ginger.
Next up, we have Todd McLeish. Todd is a professional writer. He has published 4 books on wildlife, as well as short histories of iconic Rhode Island ecosystems, including Narragansett Bay and Alton Jones Campus, and about a zillion magazine articles and newspaper columns. He leads walks and speaks publicly about wildlife, He is particularly accomplished as a birder and has more recently made studies of moths and dragonflies. And he is currently working with Ginger on the dragonflies, among other things. So perhaps we might say Todd is a naturalist with a writing hobby. Todd is a former member of the survey's board of directors, and he's going to say a few words about Charlie and Ginger. Todd.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thank you, David, for asking me to share a few comments about my thoughts on Charlie and Ginger. I first met Ginger in the mid-1990s when she was at the Nature Conservancy, and I was just a guy looking to be a volunteer in some capacity with some wildlife in Rhode Island. And she hooked me up to be essentially coordinate a speakers bureau for the Conservancy, giving presentations around the state to community groups about the rare species that the Conservancy was protecting. And over the course of the next 5 or 6 years, I probably gave 50 or 60 talks to community groups. And what really impressed me at first was that Ginger was a great teacher. I mean, I was a birder. I didn't know anything about plants or bugs or anything else beyond a few good birds. And yet she somehow figured out how to get me to be, well, a faux expert, I suppose, at least in the right position. She gave me the right level of confidence. She gave me the right level of natural history information to really get me in a place where I could serve in the role that she needed and wanted. And then she basically let me run with it. And so she was really an educator and a mentor for me in about general natural history, let alone dragonflies, but just general natural history, which really, frankly, sort of helped to launch me into the next 25 years of my career as a writer and speaker about wildlife. But of course makes her qualified, especially qualified for this award today, is this impressive knowledge about dragonflies and this amazingly massive undertaking that she's been involved with for 20 plus years, the Dragonfly Atlas for Rhode Island. And so I was one of those first dragonfly wranglers for her. So it was a couple years after she got me involved with the Speakers Bureau for the Conservancy. She was looking for volunteers to help. I said I was looking for some more hands-on wildlife activity, and she brought me in. And there were probably a dozen or two of us that were essentially her first team of volunteers. And I got hooked. I got hooked immediately. And once again, she served as a great mentor and educator for us volunteers to get us up to speed. We were all enthusiastic, but we knew nothing about dragonflies. And yet, over the years, we were able to contribute a great deal of data. And it really was this intimate knowledge that she had about these creatures, the physiology and the ecology and all the other things that go with it, that was especially impressive for me. And then to realize that really at that point, and maybe still today, Ginger was and is it in Rhode Island when it comes to dragonflies. It just was so impressive that she was the one that had all of this wonderful knowledge, and she was trying to gather more science and share that with the rest of us and bring us beginners in at the same time. Now, as I said, she did have and does have this intimate knowledge of these creatures, and when I say intimate, I mean intimate. I'll never forget a lesson that she shared with us beginners very early on. You probably know that for many of the dragonflies and damselflies, especially the bluets, the only way that you can really tell them apart is by looking at them under a microscope or a hand lens, looking at their genitalia. And so we had a little bit of lessons about insect eroticism, I guess I'll call it, although maybe not. But nonetheless, with maybe just a little embarrassed grin, she shared us all of us beginners, pointed out the naughty bits and did what she needed to do to get us up to speed and knowledgeable, because that's what you needed to do if you were into dragonflies. Now, I was a volunteer with that project for maybe 3 or 4 years, pretty intensely, but of course she carried it forward for 20 plus years to get it where it needed to be, to gather the continually update it to finally get it published last year. And through all that work, of course, she probably knows more about where every single pond and swamp and wetland is in the state than perhaps anybody, and exactly what dragonflies live at each and every single one of them. And of course, now she's in the middle of just sort of starting over again. We've got Dragonfly Atlas 2.0 getting started. We just had a meeting on Saturday, sort of updating everybody about the first year of the data collection, and now trying to look back at, well, we got all this data about these species from 20 years ago. Now we're looking at the rare species and trying to figure out 20 years ahead now, are those species still there? And so we're making progress on that. And again, it's really been Ginger leading the way and Charlie leading the way, both together on this project with just a small handful of continuing volunteers. Now, while she was doing all of that, massaging all of this data and working to get it published, I was writing a few books about wildlife in New England and writing magazine articles and other kinds of things. And so I turned to Ginger regularly, every year, regularly for stories that I was writing, for magazine articles that I was writing. She took me to some of her super secret locations that she doesn't show anybody else about where the rarest dragonflies are found in Rhode Island, where they're breeding. She answered question after question after question from me about the atlas and about dragonflies and about other insects. And she seemingly happily put up with me referring to her regularly in print as the Dragon Lady. So certainly for all of the good work that she's done in educating me and others, in collecting all this data, and just this tremendous repository that she has in her brain about all of the dragonflies and damselflies of Rhode Island. I nominated her a couple times for this award, started in 10 or 12 years ago, and now seemed to be really the right time with the publication of the first atlas, with the beginning of the new atlas. Now is really the time to publicly recognize her as a distinguished naturalist in Rhode Island. So congratulations, Ginger. Now, I first met Charlie at the very first volunteer meeting for the Dragonfly Project. I wasn't aware, and frankly, I'm still not aware, whether there was a relationship going on there or not, or whether Charlie was just a regular old volunteer like the rest of us. But pretty quickly, he demonstrated that he knew a hell of a lot about dragonflies, too. And after I got to know him, I realized that he knew a hell of a lot about a lot of things. And so, not just dragonflies. And so we all know Charlie as a longtime DEM biologist focusing on the fur bearers, though that was another group that I was kind of excited about and wanted to learn a little bit more about. And so I sort of grasped a hold of Charlie in one capacity or another to learn a little bit about those groups as well. And so I helped him out in a couple of volunteer projects with bats, trapping bats in mist nets and counting bats as they were flying out of hibernacula. I forget what else, a few other projects. And then, of course, just like with Ginger, I turned to him again and again for stories that I was writing about coyotes and beavers and bobcats and bears and all sorts of other things in Rhode Island. I also ended up, because I was at URI for a number of years, writing press releases about the scientific research happening there, wrote a number of stories about projects that were collaborations between URI scientists and Charlie. And so that was an effort where I really learned from all these other scientists, URI scientists, his colleagues in a number of other states who I talked to about regional wildlife issues, all of whom had just high praise for Charlie about his expertise, about his commitment to trying to protect and learn about these species, about his quiet approach to studying and communicating about them. Now, I always loved visiting Charlie's office. I suspect that a lot of you have been to Charlie's office. He had the best collection of mammal skulls I've ever seen. It was really cool. Every mammal, I think almost every mammal in Rhode Island, he had multiple examples of the skulls of those animals. You know, on every shelf, he just turned around in his office. It is covered in mammal skulls. It was like being in a museum, equally dusty. And And so I just love going there and seeing all those skulls. I sort of started to try to create my own little skull collection along the way, motivated by him. But I also spent some time with him in the field, again, as I was writing stories about some of the things that he was expert in. And we had some interesting times. We got stuck in the snow. I don't know if you remember it, getting stuck in the snow, trying to get into, with your truck, trying to get into Buck Hill, while I was trying to get information from him about fishers. We ended up having to dig out his truck for a while. He made me take a whiff. And of course, men, right, you smell this, right? We're all going to, of course, we're going to, we don't know what it is, but of course we're going to smell it. Turns out he asked me to smell something called booty call, which is the secretions from a bobcat's anal gland. It was pretty gross. But I did, and he of course was using this as a lure to attract bobcats to traps. So, you know, a lot of fun in the field with Charlie. You never know what you're going to get. But it also was fun to see him in his element at BioBlitz, you know, trapping bats. I should say, where'd Pete go? Pete August and Charlie would always try to trap bats at at BioBlitz. I spent a lot of time watching Pete fail at catching bats, and every time Charlie always had some great success. But nonetheless, he was trapping bats, he was catching dragonflies, he was surveying for other species. It just seemed to be really in his element. And so it was pretty clear that his knowledge about fur-bearing animals, mammals, about dragonflies, about all these other things that Mike mentioned in his letter, so there was clearly no doubt in my mind that he too should be officially designated as a Rhode Island Distinguished Naturalist. Congratulations to you both.
So we've run out of people to praise you. So now we are going to give you these plaques. So come on up and. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So I wanted to say that sometimes we don't feel very distinguished as we're crawling out of a swamp or a bog covered with water and mud and hitchhikers like leeches and ticks. Or there was the time when we got caught red-handed, or maybe red-netted is a better term, by the Scituate police as we climbed over the fence into Providence Water Supply Board property. I have to say we had permission, but the officer came right around the corner when we were literally one leg over the fence. It was embarrassing. He was very nice. He knew who we were. He asked us, he said, "You're doing dragonflies, right?" And we said yes, and he wished us good luck. So it was okay, but we didn't feel too distinguished at that time. I haven't had a whole lot of time to reflect on career things because I'm still working. I'm still teaching nature every week and still involved in the science of insect conservation. But this award has sort of given me that reason to do so. I think people do that when they get close to or at retirement. And I've been thinking about things that are the same as they were when I first started 40 some odd years ago, and some things that are different. The work we do in the field is basically the same. We use the same methods, we use the same equipment, and no, technology has not improved our ability to catch dragonflies at all. So we still use an insect net, we still process specimens in acetone just like we did 40 some odd years ago. And we still collect voucher specimens, and I know, David, I was glad to hear you talk about that, to document occurrence of species where we find them. What has changed are our options for recording our observations and our data. In the old days, if I wanted to take a photograph of a dragonfly or a habitat, I had to carry a cumbersome 35mm camera, SLR camera, around my neck. And believe me, a big camera like that and a dragonfly net, they don't go together. You can't do both things. Today, I can whip a smartphone out of my pocket, take a really surprisingly good photo, even a close-up of a dragonfly, and be on my way. We can also record our data on our smartphones or tablets or laptops and any number of devices, and we can communicate with other scientists through the magic of the internet. So some changes have happened for sure. Let me grab this. What has also changed, in my mind, is the urgency with which we do this work. With climate change, development, and forest loss having increasing effects on our wildlife and natural habitats, we have to get out here and document what's present in Rhode Island and elsewhere before it's too late. For natural history practitioners, it's critical that we think about communicating what we learn to the good folks who are doing the land conservation on the ground, because they need to know what lives in the places that they have protected in order to manage it appropriately. So increased urgency in doing land protection and in documenting what lives in Rhode Island and elsewhere, and in disseminating data and observations to the folks on the ground who need to know those things. I think the Natural History Survey is well positioned as certainly as a data dissemination and information dissemination organization and a forum to bring folks together who are experts in these things. I just also want to point out that despite protected lands and species being protected on those lands, they are not immune to the stresses and threats outside of those boundaries. And climate change knows no boundaries. So we really have to be working on management after we have protected the land. I wanted to get back to natural history. Natural history collections serve a vital resource for information for science and conservation. Well-prepared specimens in a well-curated collection can last forever. But if we're going to collect, we have to do it legally, of course. And even with insects, there are legal hoops you have to jump through for permits. We have to do it conservatively and with respect for the life that we're taking, or the lives that we're taking. And there has to be a greater goal than just to collect. And that goal is really science, research, and conservation. Let me give you an example of how significant even one collected specimen can be. We have a single state endangered dragonfly in Rhode Island. It's called a ringed bog haunter, and it has special status wherever it occurs. It's a creature of fens and bogs, as the name implied. That species was described in the late 1800s by a specimen collected in 1874 in the vicinity of Albany, New York. That specimen still exists almost 150 years later in a collection in the State Museum of New York in Albany, New York. But here's the thing. The location where that specimen was taken, and that's called the type locale. The specimen itself is called the type specimen. It's extremely significant because it's the specimen from which the species was named and described. The type locale is the location where the type specimen was taken. That's gone in New York. Nobody knows where it is. And beyond that, to date, nobody, including Charlie and I and many other biologists, have ever found ringed bog haunters in New York. They have not been seen in New York since 1874's specimen was collected. That means that the only way we know that that species ever existed in New York is from that specimen on a pin in the collection in the New York State Museum. Phenomenal story. One of these days we're going to find it, right? So natural history collections are also significant for taxonomy. And odonate taxonomy, dragonfly and damselfly taxonomy, is relatively stable compared to other groups. But in the last 10 years, we've had several shakeups in our taxonomy. And to give you an example, we had a damselfly specimen, damselfly species recently that was split into two. Well, you can't tell those two species apart by a photograph or a written description. You have to put them under a microscope and look at those parts that Todd was talking about. And so the only way we could determine whether we had both species, the new species and the old species, was to go back to our specimens in our massive atlas collection from the early 2000s and pull out all of our spread wing specimens and look at them under a microscope to determine whether we had them. So collections are valuable in taxonomy as well. What excites me the most, though, is something that Todd mentioned, in that we are in a position now where we're between 18 and 35 years beyond when that collection was put together. So now we're going back and we're actually using that collection as a baseline for current work documenting change in this fauna, and particularly our rare species. So another reason why natural history collections are valuable is to use them as baselines. They are a window, a picture of what occurred in a particular location at a particular time. I also believe very strongly in education, and I've spent much of my career as an educator. I'm pretty much a lifelong educator. I've taught many children and adults about nature and environmental science. We need to especially educate our young people. We need scientists up and coming to fix the mess that our generation and the generations before us have made. But I think we have to look and think beyond simply education of our youth. We have to inspire them we have to inspire their interest in nature and their concern for the environment. Getting them involved will inspire them to act and hopefully to choose a STEM field in the future. I want to mention a project that's going on now in Barrington at Annawampscut Creek. It's led by the 8th grade teacher at St. Luke's School, fabulous teacher Doreen Schiff, who's here tonight. And every year she takes her 8th graders to this creek and they do a scientific study of the creek. They're separated into teams. One team looks at the biota, dragging seine nets and dip nets through the water, and another team identifies what comes out and places those species into their sensitivity categories. Another team is doing physical analysis and measurements, and another team is doing chemistry, measuring the dissolved oxygen and nitrogen in the water in these systems. And at the end, they put it all together to determine the health of the creek, what that picture of the creek is in that moment and what that data says about the creek. That's the kind of project that can inspire our youth to get involved and to pick up when we leave off, to pick up our mission and continue and choose a STEM field, hopefully, in the future. And I know that many of your students have ended up in the sciences afterwards. So thank you for that wonderful project. It is amazing. Charlie and I have had so many great times in the field, and some of the speakers tonight talked about some of those. We're mostly out there searching for a particular group of organisms, or we're looking at a new habitat that we've never been in. And frankly, I'm not sure there's too many left in Rhode Island. But on some days in the field, it's not what we were looking for that makes us remember that day. It's something else that nature delivered. In the early 2000s, we went to a beach in Little Compton to look for one of those little tiny robber flies that Mike was talking about, and it lives on the sand. So like a lot of critters that live on the sand, it looks just like the sand, and it's really hard to see. But we weren't on the beach very long before we realized that something else was going on. And it was a warm September day, and there were lots of people on the beach. They were reading and sunning, and they were noticing it too. This is something that at that time, 24 years of working with dragonflies and damselflies, I had never seen before. But I had read about it plenty of times. And what it was a very large dragonfly migration, an enormous dragonfly migration. It's a right place, right time kind of thing. I have not seen one that enormous since then. We estimate that in the hour or hour and a half that we were there, at least 1,000 passed by. And these were big dragonflies. Most of them were common green darners. So they have literally nearly a 3-inch or a 3-inch wingspan, a 3-inch body length. People on the beach were noticing them. You couldn't help but notice. There was a woman sitting in a chair reading her book, and we were kind of obvious because we had our insect nets with us, and we were jumping up and down with joy at what we were seeing going by. It was a magical experience to us. And she looked at us and kind of frowned a little bit, and she said, "Gosh, it's like Armageddon." And I had to look up the definition of Armageddon. I gotta say, it's actually the definition of Armageddon is the place where the battle between good and evil occurs. And I thought, I've never been to Armageddon, but that's not what this was, because this was magic. And with this, I'm gonna toss this over to Charlie. I know he wants to say a few words as well. But I also want to just acknowledge Charlie, because he has been at my right hand or my left hand for 24 years, and we have had wonderful times in the field, excuse me, and even at home processing specimens. And Charlie is one of the best naturalists I've ever met. He was born and raised in Rhode Island, and he knows this place like the back of his hand. And over the years, he showed me some really special places in Rhode Island.
All right, well, if you all came here thinking I was going to talk about coyotes tonight, you're out of luck. I'm done with that part of my career. So anyway, Like Ginger said, I mean, I was completely shocked, pleasantly so, when Keith and Pete called us and contacted us and to say we were going to be given this award. And then I started having to think about, what am I going to say? So the last couple of weeks as I'm sitting in my tree stand, not seeing any deer, or on the ladder painting the house, I've been racking my brain as, what am I going to talk about? What should I talk about? Should I talk about climate change or fur bearer conservation? Nothing seemed to, fit what I wanted to say. And then it slowly came to me that, it was something more simple than that. As I started to reflect on my life and in my career, it became clear to me that nothing that I have learned or accomplished would have been possible without the help and influence of other people. I've been blessed, and I'm getting emotional. When Mike wrote that letter, I was almost crying. It's and having all my friends here and stuff, it's really, it's really it makes me happy. Anyway, I've been blessed throughout my whole life, to have been and continue to be encouraged by other people, who have educated me, supported me, driven me around when I was a kid. Some of my earliest memories are walks, in the woods or fishing trips with my dad, working with my Uncle Frank in his garden, or him taking me to Thomas Del Santo's taxidermy shop. So anybody who grew up in this part of the world will remember Thomas Del Santo had a taxidermy shop above his carriage house in downtown Warren. That you'd go in there, it's like, oh my God, Todd had all these, stuffed animals in there. And for me as a little kid, that was just, it just blew me away. I was just fascinated with that stuff. Or my mother would drive me and my friends after school down to Echo Lake or Bicknell Pond to catch turtles and frogs, and then, put them in the car and bring them home. And we built backyard ponds and stuff like that. And Scott, we did bring them back, at the end of the summer. So just so you know, there was mostly painted turtles and garter snakes. But yeah, that was the other thing. So my mother was very tolerant that, frogs are okay, turtles were fine, but snakes, she just could not, snakes. So for all that, she had done for us, one day I thanked her. I brought home a plastic bag with 18 garter snakes in it that I collected at the old landfill on Upland Way one day, proud as could be with this, bag of snakes, She almost died there on the spot, so, but anyway, or my parents driving me up to Providence, the old Audubon office on the east side of Providence, with the bookstore there, and I used to be like, everybody else was buying games and stuff like that, and I would be fascinated by books on birds and things like that, so, I was a little different, but, I also had several friends I grew up with in my neighborhood who, had similar interests, so, I was lucky to have, friends to share time with, go fishing and catching turtles and all that kind of stuff, and it just seemed like every hour that we were not in school or eating dinner, we were outside doing something. It was building forts, it was fishing, it was trapping and stuff like that. In fact, I was never the best of students, and I was probably the last kid in school in the morning and the first kid to leave school in the morning because I either had to check my traps before school or, we were going to get on our bikes and go over to Lavin's Marine and catch flatfish, in the afternoon after school, which, winter flounder for those of you who don't know them as flatfish. But, and that continued. As I grew older, I had many other mentors and teachers, who saw that I had an interest in the natural world and maybe had some skills and encouraged me to pursue, a path in the environmental field. And then I had coworkers and friends who, generously shared their knowledge and experience with me. And we spend and continue to spend time in the field together. George Seavey, Chris Rathel, Michael Thomas, they were all dear friends of ours, and I've learned so much from them. And I just hope in some way that I've been able to give back to others, has so generously been shared with me throughout my life, and maybe influence some other people, some other young people, hopefully, in a positive way, and made, some contribution to the understanding of natural history in our state. I want to thank the Rhode Island Natural History Survey nominating committee, for their consideration for this award, which I greatly appreciate. And I want to thank David and Kyra, where's Kyra, for the work that you do with BioBlitz and other programs and that it can instill a passion for nature in some young person such as I was at one time. I want to thank the Barrington Land Conservation Trust for hosting this event and for the great work that they do to preserve and protect the remaining open spaces in our town. And I want to thank the University of Rhode Island, where I received a great education, had a lot of fun, just barely got through it, but, anyway, I look back on it now and say, it was a great time there. And, and it continued to have, throughout my working life, I had the opportunity, which I would have never envisioned when I was there, going to school there, to remain involved in programs there, and work with my former, professors there, as a colleague, so that was really special to me. And I just want to thank everybody else for coming here tonight and sharing this award with us, especially my former colleagues and dear friends, to many who drove a long way to get here. I really appreciate that. I'm very happy to see you all. And I especially want to thank my wife, Ginger, who I'm so proud of and honored to be sharing this award with tonight. And she taught me everything I know about dragonflies. And she is extremely tolerant. Man, I get away with a lot, I'll tell you. So thank you very much. So thank you.
I just want to add also, I remiss before I didn't thank everyone who's here tonight. Great for you to come and share this with us. We both appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Well, congratulations to everybody, to Helen and Charlie and Ginger, and thanks to Kyra and Don, Pete, Cindy, and everybody else who contributed to this evening. And that concludes tonight's program. The library closes at 9, so as much as you might like to linger, well, there is a playground outside. Maybe you could hang out there till the cops find you. But anyway, thanks everybody for coming very much.